an assessment tool to make programming sensitive to urbanizing contexts.
This 10-dimensional model of urbanization has been refined and translated into a tool intended to encourage different stakeholders to, firstly, become aware and mindful of the urbanization process being underway. Secondly, consciously form an opinion on whether the initiative should or should not relate to or influence each dimension. Thirdly, identify how strongly this relation or influence tends to be present. And lastly, provide some indications of why a relation or influence is particularly weak or strong, and what aspects their presence or absence may lead to a particular outcome. Switch to the Sheet 1 questionnaire of this workbook. You can start by creating an ideal importance profile in the red section. Here you indicate how strongly you intend to address, in other words, influence or relate to each dimension. Assign a discretionary value to each dimension, based on your estimate of what your initiative should emphasize and focus on. To create this ideal profile, fill in the 10 light red fields in column C, giving each a value between 0 and 5, whereby 0 means not at all, and 5 means fully. Note that this first step is optional. It allows you to draw a comparison between your ideal and a measured profile. If you prefer, you can also skip directly to the next step. Continue by measuring the presence of each dimension in your initiative in the blue section. Read the 30 questions in column E, and give each again a value between 0 and 5. The term initiatives refers to your project, strategy, or any other kind of initiative. Here are a few hints. Do a first run-through. If you don't understand a question, skip it. If you have time left, you can still return at the end. Don't overthink it. Go with your gut feeling and provide an intuitive guess. More is better. It's more important to answer as many questions as possible, rather than answering them very precisely. That's all. You're done. Interpreting the result. Your profiles are presented in a graphic and a numeric manner. Read them in parallel. Simple radar diagram. The diagram on Sheet 2 simple radar diagram has a blue profile and possibly, if Step 1 had been completed, an orange profile. Both profiles represent how strongly a dimension is present, i.e. being addressed by the initiative, the orange line in an ideal manner, building on the discretionary opinion of the user, versus the blue line presenting the result of the measurement after answering the 30 questions. The blue values are calculated as the average of the 3 factors composing each dimension. Each factor is displayed in the form of a diamond, red being the first, green the second, and light blue the third factor. Note that if multiple values coincide, the top one may conceal the other ones, and if the user has skipped a question, the corresponding diamond will not appear. Combined chart. Alternatively, you can use the combined chart on Sheet 3 combined chart. It presents exactly the same information, but in a different presentation. Each dimension is represented by a color, and the black lines represent the respective indicators. The dotted segments represent the ideal profile, blue line in previous diagram, and the filled-in segments represent the measured presence, red line in previous diagram. The values of each indicator are displayed by a red cross, corresponding to the dimensions in the previous diagram. While you look at the diagram, ask yourself the following questions. Firstly, which values of the ideal and the measured profile match your expectations, and which ones come as a surprise? Secondly, where do the ideal and the measured profile coincide? These are areas where the measured presence meets your ideal intention. Thirdly, where do the two profiles differ significantly? Ask yourself why this may be the case. Is there a simple explanation? Does this pose an issue? Lastly, it may be useful to dig a bit deeper. Consider the 3 factors of each dimension, which lead to the result. For instance, do they scatter widely on the scale, or do they coincide largely? This is the time to look at the numeric analysis. Numeric analysis. The numeric analysis presents the same figures as the diagrams. Each dimension is listed, followed by the ideal importance value and the value of measured presence, which is the average of the 3 factors, normalized to a scale from 0 to 1. The shade of each cell indicates its value, with values closer to 0 becoming intenser red, and values closer to 1 becoming intenser green. As an example, look at the values for economic engine. They are pretty close, meaning that the ideal and the measured presence do not differ much. However, within the dimension, one factor is very strongly represented, whereas the other 2 factors are almost absent. The interpretation could be along the following lines of thought. Overall, this strategy doesn't prioritize leveraging economic growth effects of urbanization, which is reflected in the measured presence of indicators. However, the aspect of raising standards of living and well-being of the populations is an outlier, as it scores very high. A follow-on question could be, given interdependencies, is it intended and sensible that one factor is so important while the others are insignificant? Is there an opportunity for more consistency and synergies? Now look at the values under service system structures, which differ greatly. Addressing the increasing complexity of basic service delivery should be a key issue, yet in reality, while planning well for future growth and development, there is very little consideration for spatial dimensions and structures of the underlying urban system, risking increased inequalities and inefficiencies. This allows for a more thorough reconsideration of whether the basal process of urbanization has been adequately taken into account, meaning whether the initiative is sufficiently urbanization sensitive.